The grand wedding hall was buzzing with excitement, the sound of laughter and clinking glasses filling the air. The bride and groom stood under a canopy of golden lights, ready to exchange their vows. But just as the officiant raised his hand to silence the room, the heavy wooden doors creaked open, and in walked Barron Trump. All eyes turned to him, and the murmurs quickly grew into whispers. Why was he here, uninvited, interrupting a moment so sacred? Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the twists and turns of Barron Trump's unpredictable journey. The crowd was stunned. The bride's father, a well-known businessman, furrowed his brows and took a step forward, his face a mix of confusion and irritation. The groom tightened his grip on the bride's hand, his jaw clenching as if bracing for confrontation. And Barron, dressed impeccably in a tailored black suit, walked with purpose. His expression was calm, but his eyes burned with something unspoken, a secret that had brought him here. "Excuse me," Barron's deep yet composed voice echoed in the hall. "I need to speak with the couple before they exchange vows. It's urgent." The bride gasped softly, her fingers trembling as she clutched her bouquet. "Do you even know us?" she whispered, her voice barely audible but filled with disbelief. Barron paused, his gaze locking on hers. "I know enough," he said, his tone steady but laced with mystery. "And what I'm about to say might change everything." The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Guests exchanged nervous glances, some reaching for their phones, ready to record whatever spectacle was about to unfold. The groom's best man stepped forward, his expression sharp. "Look, if this is some kind of joke, you've picked the wrong place and time." Barron didn't flinch. Instead, he pulled a small envelope from his jacket pocket and held it up. "This isn't a joke," he said firmly. "And I promise, once I've spoken, you'll understand why I had to do this." The bride's mother clutched her pearls, her voice trembling as she whispered to her husband, "Do you think it's about us? Or the deal?" Barron's eyes flickered toward her for a brief moment, as if he'd heard her words. But his focus quickly returned to the couple. "Trust me," he said, his voice softer now. "You'll want to hear this before you say, 'I do.'" A hushed silence fell over the hall. The bride, visibly shaken but curious, finally spoke. "Fine. Say what you have to say." Barron stepped closer, his every move deliberate, as if he were weighing each word carefully in his mind. The crowd leaned in, holding their breath. What could possibly be so important, so shocking, that Barron Trump would risk interrupting a wedding to reveal it? Barron took a deep breath, his eyes scanning the room as if gauging who might understand what he was about to reveal. His voice dropped, calm yet commanding. "Before I say anything else, I need to ask you both one question. Are you marrying each other because of love, or something else?" The bride stiffened, her face turning pale. The groom frowned deeply, glancing at her before responding. "What kind of question is that?" "Of course, we love each other." Barron's lips curved into a faint, almost knowing smile. He held up the envelope again. "Then you won't mind me sharing what's inside this with everyone here." Gasps rippled through the audience. The bride's father stepped forward, his face red with anger. "Enough of this nonsense. Barron Trump or not, you have no right to disrupt this ceremony." "Security." Barron didn't budge. He turned his gaze to the bride, his voice unwavering. "Do you want me to stop? If you tell me to leave, I will. But before you do, ask yourself if you can live with the truth staying buried." The bride's hands trembled as she looked at the envelope, as though it held the answer to something she'd been avoiding. Her father barked orders to security guards at the door, but they hesitated. This wasn't just anyone standing here, it was Barron Trump. Finally, the bride's voice broke the tension. "Wait," she said softly, her eyes brimming with tears. "What truth? What are you talking about?" Barron stepped closer, lowering his voice so only the couple and those near the altar could hear. "This marriage isn't what you think it is," he said, his words cutting like a blade. "Someone in this room has manipulated everything to bring you two together, for reasons that have nothing to do with love." The groom's eyes narrowed. "That's absurd. You don't even know us." "Don't I?" Barron shot back. His calm demeanor cracked for just a moment, revealing a spark of anger. Do you really think it's a coincidence that your father's business suddenly got a major contract from her family's company 3 months ago? Or that this wedding was pushed forward so quickly, without giving anyone time to think? The bride's father stepped forward again, his voice booming. How dare you bring my business into this? This is a private matter. But Barron ignored him, his focus locked on the bride. You felt it, didn't you? He asked gently. That nagging doubt in your heart. The whispers you heard late at night. The deals your father made behind closed doors. Tears began to spill down the bride's cheeks. She turned to her father, her voice shaking. Is that true? Did you force this? Her father hesitated, his face hardening. I did what was best for you, he said firmly. For our family. The groom stepped back, stunned. Wait, what is he talking about? What deals? Barron opened the envelope and pulled out a stack of papers. These, he said, are contracts signed by your fathers. They've been planning this union for months, treating it like a business merger, not a marriage. The bride staggered, her legs threatening to give out. The groom caught her, his face pale as he stared at the papers. Is this true? He whispered, his voice hollow. The room fell silent, all eyes on the bride's father. His lips pressed into a thin line, his silence louder than any admission of guilt. Barron took a step back, his voice softening. I didn't come here to ruin your day, he said. I came here to give you a choice, a chance to decide for yourselves what your future should look like, without anyone else pulling the strings. The bride looked at the groom, her tears falling freely now. I don't know what to believe anymore, she said, her voice breaking. And that's why I'm here, Barron said, his tone gentle but firm. You deserve to know the truth before you make the biggest decision of your lives. The crowd buzzed with whispers, the tension in the room thick enough to suffocate. The bride and groom stood frozen, their perfect day unraveling in front of everyone. And yet, somewhere in their eyes, a spark of something new began to grow. Uncertainty, yes, but also a glimmer of freedom. What would they do next? Would they confront their families, walk away from the altar, or choose to rewrite their own story together? Everyone waited, holding their breath, as the weight of Barron's revelation settled over the room. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by the faint rustling of papers in Barron's hand. The bride's trembling fingers clutched the edge of her gown as she looked at her father, tears streaming down her cheeks. Is this really what you wanted for me? To trade my happiness for some deal? Her father's face hardened. You don't understand, sweetheart. This isn't just about you. It's about our family, our future. Sometimes sacrifices have to be made. The groom's voice rose, sharp and unsteady. Sacrifices? You mean selling your daughter's life like a piece of property? Is that what you call love? The bride turned to the groom, her voice barely a whisper. And you? You knew, didn't you? Maybe not the details, but you must have felt it too. Something wasn't right. Why didn't you say anything? He shook his head, his jaw tightening. I thought it was nerves. I thought we were just moving fast because that's what everyone wanted. Barron watched the scene unfold, his expression unreadable. Slowly, he folded the contracts back into the envelope and slipped it under his arm. His presence, though calm, was a reminder of the storm he'd unleashed. Enough of this, the bride's father growled, stepping forward. You've said your piece, young man. Now leave before you cause any more damage. Barron's gaze met his, unflinching. The damage was already done long before I walked into this room. You just didn't think anyone would call you out on it. The father's face flushed with anger, but before he could respond, the bride raised her hand. Stop, she said, her voice trembling but firm. Stop pretending this is about protecting me. You didn't even ask what I wanted. You didn't care. The crowd murmured, uneasy. Guests shifted in their seats, some exchanging glances, others staring intently at the couple. The weight of Barron's intervention had turned what was meant to be a celebration into a reckoning. Then, the bride did something no one expected. She stepped away from the groom and walked toward Barron. Her voice cracked as she spoke, but there was steel in her tone. Why did you come here? She asked. Why would you risk embarrassing yourself, your family, to expose this? Barron's gaze softened, and for a moment, his composure seemed to falter. "Because I've seen what happens when people live lives dictated by others," he said. "I've watched people lose themselves because they were too afraid to stand up for what they really wanted. You deserve the truth. Whether you like me for it or not, I wasn't going to let you walk into this blind." The bride's breath hitched, her eyes searching his face for a trace of insincerity. But all she saw was someone who had taken a risk for her. The groom stepped forward, his voice cutting through the tension. "So what now? Are we just supposed to walk away from this? From each other?" Barron's lips pressed into a thin line. "That's not my decision to make. It's yours. But if you're asking me what I'd do," he paused, his voice carrying the weight of his own experiences, "I'd ask myself if I could ever truly be happy living someone else's dream." The room fell silent again, the question hanging in the air like a challenge. The bride looked at the groom, and for a moment, the world seemed to shrink to just the two of them. The groom spoke first, his voice low but steady. "I don't want this if it isn't real," he said. "I don't care about contracts or deals. I want you. Just you. But if you don't feel the same, if this isn't what you want," he swallowed hard, his words trailing off. The bride's tears spilled over as she reached for his hand. "I don't know what's real anymore," she admitted. "But I know I can't go through with this, not like this." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd as her words sank in. The bride turned to the guests, her voice trembling but resolute. "I'm sorry. I can't do this. Not today." Her father's outrage exploded in a shout, but the groom silenced him with a sharp glare. "Let her speak," he said firmly. Barron took a step back, his mission complete. As the bride and groom faced their families and the sea of shocked guests, the weight of their decision hung heavy in the air. This wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning. The room was frozen in disbelief, the air thick with tension. The bride's declaration echoed in every corner, silencing even the whispers of the most judgmental guests. Barron, standing near the exit, glanced toward the couple. His expression was calm, yet there was a flicker of something in his eyes. Satisfaction, perhaps, or relief that the truth had finally surfaced. The bride's father stepped forward, his face red with fury. "You're making a spectacle of yourself," he hissed, his voice low but seething with anger. "Do you even realize what this will do to us? To our reputation?" The bride squared her shoulders, her voice growing steadier with each word. "Your reputation? That's all this has ever been about, hasn't it? You don't care about me. You care about appearances, about power. But I'm not a pawn in your games anymore." Gasps rippled through the crowd, and several guests exchanged uneasy glances. The father's face twisted in rage, but before he could respond, the groom intervened. "She's right," the groom said firmly. "We've all been playing along with this charade, pretending it's for the best. But it's not. I love her, but I won't marry her under these circumstances. Not with these lies hanging over us." The bride's mother, who had been silent up until now, finally spoke. Her voice was soft, almost pleading. "Darling, think about this. Marriage isn't just about love. It's about stability, security. You don't want to throw all of that away on a whim." The bride turned to her mother, her gaze unwavering. "It's not a whim, Mom. It's my life. And if I'm going to build a future, it's going to be on my terms, not yours, or Dad's, or anyone else's." The tension in the room was palpable, but amidst the chaos, Barron's voice cut through like a blade. "You've made your decision," he said, his tone even. "Now it's time to stand by it." All eyes turned to him, and for a moment, the room seemed to hold its breath. Barron continued, addressing both the bride and groom. "This won't be easy. People will talk, they'll judge, and they'll try to tear you down. But if you're honest with yourselves, if you fight for what you truly want, none of that will matter. You'll find your way." The bride nodded slowly, tears brimming in her eyes. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice barely audible. The father's rage boiled over. "Who do you think you are?" he roared, pointing an accusatory finger at Barron. "You come in here, disrupt my daughter's wedding, and lecture us on morality? What gives you the right?" Barron stood his ground, his voice calm but firm. I don't need your permission to do what's right. If you want to blame someone, blame yourself. You created this mess, not me." The crowd erupted into murmurs, and the tension threatened to spill over into chaos. But before things could escalate further, the bride spoke again. "Enough," she said, her voice carrying an authority that surprised even herself. "This is my life, my wedding. And if I have to burn every bridge in this room to find my happiness, so be it." The groom reached for her hand, his grip steady and reassuring. "We'll figure it out together," he said, his voice filled with conviction. Barron nodded, a faint smile playing on his lips. Without another word, he turned and began walking toward the door. The whispers of the crowd followed him, but he didn't look back. As he stepped outside into the crisp evening air, Barron allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. This wasn't about being a hero or proving a point. It was about standing up for what was right, no matter the cost. The sound of footsteps behind him broke his thoughts. He turned to see the bride's younger brother, a teenager with wide, curious eyes, hurrying after him. "Wait," the boy called out. I just wanted to say thank you for what you did in there." Barron regarded him thoughtfully. "Don't thank me," he said. "Just remember this moment. One day, you'll have your own decisions to make. Choose wisely." The boy nodded, his expression earnest. "I will. I promise." With that, Barron walked away, his figure disappearing into the night. But the ripple effects of his actions were just beginning to take hold, inside and outside that grand hall. Inside the hall, the atmosphere remained tense but undeniably transformed. The bride's resolute stand had fractured the facade of harmony her family had carefully constructed. Guests who had come for a celebration found themselves caught in the whirlwind of an unfolding drama, unsure whether to stay or leave. The bride's father, seething, turned to his guests, desperate to salvage his crumbling reputation. "This is nothing but a momentary lapse," he declared, his voice trembling with a mixture of anger and desperation. "We will resolve this privately." But his words fell flat. The room no longer seemed under his control, and the weight of truth hung heavily over every corner. Several guests whispered among themselves, questioning the family's integrity. The bride's mother approached her daughter hesitantly. "You've made your point," she said, her voice low and trembling. "But we can fix this. Just come with me, and we'll talk it over. Please, don't throw everything away like this." The bride met her mother's pleading eyes, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "I'm not throwing anything away. I'm taking back what's mine, my life, my choices. I love you, Mom, but I can't keep living like this." The groom stood beside her, his own voice unwavering. "We deserve better than a life built on lies. If we're going to start a future together, it has to be an honest one." The guests, initially stunned into silence, began to murmur their support. A woman near the back, someone who had been a friend of the family for years, spoke up. "You're braver than most people here. It takes courage to stand up to the people you love for what you believe in." The father turned on her angrily. "This is none of your business," he snapped. But the tide had shifted. Others began chiming in, their voices growing louder. "Maybe it's time we all stop pretending everything's perfect," said an older man. "Sometimes the truth is what sets us free." The father's attempts to regain control crumbled further. He stormed out of the hall, his face a mask of fury and humiliation. The mother hesitated, torn between her loyalty to her husband and the undeniable strength her daughter was showing. Meanwhile, the bride's younger brother, who had spoken to Barron outside, quietly re-entered the hall. He approached his sister and slipped his hand into hers. "I'm proud of you," he said softly, his voice filled with admiration. The bride looked down at him, her eyes filling with tears. "Thank you," she whispered. As the tension began to settle, the guests' focus shifted. Whispers about Barron's unexpected intervention spread like wildfire. Who was he to step into such a personal moment, and how had he managed to shift the entire dynamic? One guest, a journalist by trade, couldn't help but voice her thoughts. "He's more than just a public figure," she said, addressing the small group around her. "Barron Trump might have his privileges, but tonight he showed something rare, integrity. He didn't have to step in, but he did because he saw something wrong. Her words resonated, and a wave of quiet agreement rippled through the crowd. The narrative of the evening began to shift, from a wedding gone awry to a story of courage and conviction. The bride and groom, hand in hand, looked around at the people who remained. "For those of you still here," the bride began, her voice carrying a mix of gratitude and determination, "thank you. This wasn't the wedding anyone expected, but maybe it's the one we needed. This is where our real story begins." A round of applause broke out, tentative at first but quickly growing stronger. The couple stood at the center of it all, their love and resilience shining brighter than any ceremony could have orchestrated. Outside, Barron stood at the edge of the parking lot, his car waiting. He paused for a moment, glancing back at the grand hall. He didn't need to go back inside to know that what he'd set in motion would leave a lasting impact. As he stepped into the car, his phone buzzed with a notification. A message from an unknown number read, "You don't know how much your words meant tonight. Thank you for helping me find my voice." Barron read the message, a small smile playing on his lips. He didn't reply, but as the car pulled away, he felt a rare sense of fulfillment. Sometimes, stepping into the chaos was the only way to bring clarity. As the wedding night drew to a close, the once chaotic hall settled into an atmosphere of newfound unity. Those who stayed behind felt they had witnessed something extraordinary, a rare moment where truth, love, and courage overpowered deceit and control. The bride and groom stood together, embracing their imperfect yet authentic beginning, while the guests who supported them lingered, sharing laughter, stories, and encouragement. Meanwhile, the father's absence loomed large, but it was no longer a shadow over the night. The bride's mother, after some time alone in contemplation, returned to the hall, her expression softened. She approached her daughter cautiously. "I'm sorry," she began, her voice trembling. "I've been so focused on appearances that I forgot what really matters. I'm proud of you, for standing up, for choosing love, for being brave in a way I never was." Tears welled in the bride's eyes as she hugged her mother tightly. "That means everything to me, Mom," she whispered. Outside the hall, Barron's car cruised through the quiet streets, the glow of the city lights flickering past. He leaned back in his seat, reflecting on the night. He hadn't set out to change anyone's life when he arrived at that wedding, but somehow, it felt like he'd done exactly that. His driver glanced at him in the rearview mirror. "You sure know how to make an impact, Mr. Trump," he remarked with a chuckle. Barron smiled faintly. "Sometimes people just need a little nudge to see what's already inside them," he replied. The car stopped at a red light, and Barron gazed out of the window. He spotted a street musician playing a soulful tune on his guitar, drawing a small crowd despite the late hour. It was a reminder of how simple, honest moments often held the most power. As the car moved again, Barron pulled out his phone and typed a brief note, not to anyone in particular, but more as a reflection. Change doesn't always require a grand plan or authority. It starts when someone speaks up, takes a stand, or simply cares enough to act. Sometimes, all it takes is one moment. He put the phone away and closed his eyes, a rare sense of calm washing over him. Back at the wedding, the couple made their way to the center of the hall, where a small band was still playing softly. The groom extended his hand to the bride, and they began to dance, surrounded by those who mattered most. It wasn't the grand, polished wedding her father had envisioned, but it was something far better, real, heartfelt, and entirely their own. The younger brother, standing off to the side, whispered to a friend, "You know, I didn't think he'd actually come. Barron Trump showing up was the last thing I expected." His friend nodded. "Yeah, but look what happened. He didn't just show up, he helped change everything." In the weeks that followed, the story of Barron Trump's unplanned wedding intervention went viral, capturing the hearts of people across the country. News outlets, social media, and even late-night shows buzzed with the tale of how he stood up for love and truth in a way no one saw coming. For the bride and groom, however, it wasn't the headlines or the public's fascination that mattered. It was the life they began building together, a life rooted in honesty, courage, and the knowledge that they had the strength to face anything together. As for Barron, he carried on with his life, knowing he'd made a difference not by wielding power but by using his voice at the right moment. He wasn't just a name in the headlines. He had become a symbol of standing up when it mattered most. And in a world often consumed by appearances, that was a story worth telling.